Good day, everyone. Our first lesson in basic calculus for the second semester is about the limits of a function. So we will be learning what is the meaning of limits of a function, and we will also find the limits of some given function, right? So these are the learning competencies. And these are the learning objectives. All right. So before we jump to our lesson proper about the finding the limits of a function, we will first recall on evaluating functions. Okay, so this is very useful in finding the limits of a function. Okay, let us now find the value of f of x given the specified value of x. Okay, so recall on evaluation of function. So what we are gonna do here, given f of x is equal to 3x minus 5 when x is equal to 9, we will be just substitute the given x value to our function. Okay, so for this, substituting 9 to our x, this will give us f of 9 is equal to 3 multiplied to 9 minus 5. Okay, so that will give us 9 times 3 is 27 minus 5. Our final answer will be 22. Okay, so that's how we evaluate functions. Let's have the second example. F of x is equal to 5x squared plus 1 when x is equal to 2.9999. Okay, so again, substitute f of 2.9999 is equal to 5x or 5 times 2.9999 squared plus 1. Okay, so from this, we can use our scientific calculator in computing the exact value. Okay, so 5 times 2.9999 squared plus 1 is equal to 45.997. Okay, let's have number 3. Again, substitute the given value of x, which is 1.5. So this will give us f of 1.5 is equal to 1.5 squared plus 5 times 1.5 minus 3 all over 1.5 plus 2. Okay, and this will give us answer of, okay, 1.5 squared plus 5 times 1.5 minus 3 over 1.5 plus 2. Okay, that gives us 27 over 14 or approximately equal to 1.9286. All right, so let's have number 4. So number 4 is f of x is equal to the absolute value of 2x minus 7. So what's the f of x when x is 3.8? Okay, so substitute again. F of 3.8 is equal to the absolute value of 2 times 3.8 minus 7. That will give us value of Okay, 2 times 3.8 minus 7 is 0.6. All right. So last number, number 5, is f of x is equal to x minus 3 if x is less than 1 and x squared plus 5 if x is greater than or equal to 1. So this is called, okay, so yung number 5 natin is called the piecewise function. Yan. So piecewise function, since it has certain condition, okay, so magkaiba yung formula for each given condition. Okay, so let us have an example. What if I ask you, what is the value of f of x if x is equal to 0.3? Okay, so 0.3, this will fall dun sa ating unang equation sa ating piecewise function. Okay? So 0.3 ang gagamitin natin ay itong x minus 3 again dahil 0.3 is less than 1. Okay? So simply substitute f of 0.3 is equal to, substitute sa x minus 3 is, that will be 0.3 minus 3. That will give us an answer of negative 2.7. Okay? So next, what if ang given na value ay x is equal to 5? Okay? So since this falls under the second expression, okay, 5 is greater than 1. So ang gagamitin natin ay ito ng x squared plus 5. So evaluate f of 5, that is equal to, okay, substitute sa x squared plus 5, we have 5 squared plus 5, and then simplify. 25 squared is equal to 25 plus 5, and that will give us an answer of 30. Okay, so that is okay, so that is for evaluation of functions. Okay, so this is just a recall, and this will help us in finding the limit of a function. So now let's dive into our lesson, which is the limit. Okay, so we will be completing the table of values below to find, okay, itong naka-square is read as the limit of 2 plus 4x as x approaches 4. Okay, so pansinin natin dito, meron tayong function. Ang function natin ay yung 2 plus 4x. Siya yung ating f of x. And siya rin yung sasubstitutan natin ng certain values of x from our table. So we will be completing this table and we will answer the guide questions. Okay, so for x is equal to 3, okay, let's find. So 2 plus 4x, calculate if 3, that will give us 14. If 3.5, that will give us 16. If 3.8, that will give us 17.2. If 3.9, si x, okay, si value ng f of x natin ay 17.6. If x is 3.99, so f of x is 17.96. And lastly, for the first table, if x is 3.9999, that will give us an f of x value of 17.9996. Okay, so let's have now the second table. Still, we are going to use 2 plus 4x. Okay, substitute natin. 5 naman. How about yung 5? It will give us 22. Okay, 4.8. That will give us 21.2. Okay, so that will give us 20 if x is 4.5. If 4.1 naman, 18.4. Okay, so if 4.001, that will give us 18.004. And if x is 4.0000001, that will give us 18.50. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 4. Okay. So now, let's answer the guide question. So how did we find the values for f of x? We just have substituted the values of x, each values on the table, okay, sa ating given na function, which is 2 plus 4x, and then solve. And then number 2, what did we notice about the given values of x in the two tables? Okay, so kung mapapansin natin, tingin muna tayo sa first table. Nagsimula sa 3 hanggang umabot sa 3.9999. Okay, so habang bumababa tayo sa ating table, okay, so it has an increasing value, and also it approaches, okay, or lumalapit yung value niya sa isang certain value. Okay, so and that is 4, no? So we have noticed that in the first table, the values of x are increasing and approaching to 4. Second table naman, we have noticed that the values of x are decreasing but also approaching the value of 4. Okay, so it gets closer and closer to 4. So both tables. Now, on the other hand, what did we observe about the values on f of x? Okay, so sa first table muna, like the x values, it also approaches a certain value. Mapapansin natin, ayan, 14, 16, 17.2, 17.6, 17.96, 17.9996. Okay, it approaches the value of, okay, it gets closer and closer to the value of 18. Okay, so on the other hand, second table, it also gets closer and closer to the value of 18 as we go on, or as our x also approaches 4. Okay, so that's basically finding the limit of a function. So by synthesizing our observations on the values of x and f of x on the two tables, so how are we going to define a limit? Okay, so ganito nyo makikita yung question regarding finding a limit. So what is the limit of 2 plus 4x as x approaches 4. So, ganun po siya binabasa. Okay? So, based sa ginawa natin, as x approaches a certain value, ayan, yung nandito, kagaya ng sabi dyan, x approaches, kaya nakaturo kay 4, x approaches 4. Okay? So, saan daw nag-a-approach naman si f of x natin? Okay? So, or in Tagalog, limit, di ba? Hangganan. Okay? So, ano ba yung hangganan ng ating function as x gets closer and closer to 4. Okay? So, ang hangganan niya or the limit niya ayon sa ating table is 18. Okay? So, now let's define the limit. Consider a function of a single variable x and consider a constant c which the variable x will approach. The limit to be denoted by L is the unique real value. Okay, so this is the definition of the limit. Okay, yung sabi ko kanina, the unique real value that f of x will approach as x approaches c. Okay, so in symbols, we write this process as limit of f of x. Ayan, so ganito in symbols. And this can be read as the limit of f of x as x approaches c is L. Okay? So yung example natin kanina, 18 yung ating naging limit. Okay? So to evaluate the given limit, we will make use of a table. Kagaya ng ginawa na rin natin kanina sa previous slides. Okay? To keep track of the effect that the approach of x toward 4 will have on f of x. So, ang naging effect niya, as x approaches 4, okay, it gets closer and closer to 4, yung f of x natin also approach a certain value which is 18. Okay? So, moreover, si x natin ay pwedeng i-approach si 4 in two ways. No? So, pwedeng i-approach niya si 4. Okay? From values less than 4 or from values na nasa right or left ni 4. So, that is from the left of 4 hanggang lumapit sa value ng 4, yung kanyang x. So, that is our, so yun yung pinapakita ng ating table na nasa left. So, to illustrate, so the limit of 2 plus 4x as x approaches 4, kung mapapansin natin may negative sign dito. So that means x approaches 4 from the left. Okay? So yung mga values na yan ay mas mababa kay 4 pero papalapit pa rin kay 4. Okay? So our limit of 2 plus 4x as x approaches 4 raised to negative or from the left is 18, no? Kung mapapansin natin, f of x gets closer and closer to the value of 18. So our answer for that is 18. So how about on the other hand, pwede nating i-approach si 4 from the right, okay? Or values greater than 4. Ayan, so nagsimula sa 5, gets closer and x gets closer and closer to 4. Okay? So f of x also, like the first table, it approaches the value of 18. Okay? To illustrate, this is limit of 2 plus 4x as x approaches 4 raised to positive, okay? Meaning nasa right ni 4. Okay? So, gigitna natin yung 4. Yan. X approaches the value of 4 from the right naman. Kasi greater than 4 yung mga values sa ating X for this table. Alright, so we approach 4 in two ways, from the left and from the right. And nakuha natin, equal yung kanilang sagot. So from the left, 18 din. And also from the right, the limit is also 18. So thus, we can conclude, ayan, so the limit of 2 plus 4x as x approaches 4 is equal to 18. So dapat, sinasabi lang dito, dapat ang limit from the left and from the right of our function must be equal to each other, okay? So that we can get the answer for the limit. Okay? So pag hindi po yan equal yung limit niya from the left and from the right, so the limit does not exist. So mamaya ipapakita natin so paano yung hindi nag-exist yung kanyang limit. Okay? So for the graph of 2 plus 4x, let's have this one. Okay? So kung nakikita natin sa graph, naka-plot na si 418. Okay? So titingnan natin yung limit ng ating function as x approaches 4. So tingin tayo sa x and y coordinate. Yan. So si x coordinate ko as it approaches 4. Okay, papalapit ako kay 4. Ayan. From the left, dahil mas maliit yung value ni 4, okay, pansinin nyo rin yung value ni y. It also gets closer and closer to the value of 18. Okay? So, and from the right naman, values greater than 4, as x, yung x coordinate, x approaches 4. Okay? So, yung y coordinate naman din natin ay also nag-approach kay 18. Okay? So that's basically the limit of a function. Okay? So yung ina-approach ni f of x na value as x approaches also a given value. Okay, let's have the second example. We'll be evaluating the limit of x squared minus 3x plus 2 all over x minus 2 as x approaches 2. Okay? So ito na yung function natin ngayon and yung ina-approach na value ni x ay 2 na ngayon. Okay? So let us have the two tables. Yung unang table, it approaches 2 from the left, no? Kung mapapansin natin, mas maliit yung values na yan kay 2, but it gets closer and closer to 2. And yung nasa right ay x approaches 2 from the right. Mapapansin din natin, the values are greater than 2, but it gets closer and closer to 2. Okay? So, nung sinubstitute ang bawat value of x, okay, so we got the values for f of x. So pag sinubstitute si 1, f of x is 0. And then next, so on and so forth. 1.5, 0.5. Okay, hanggang makarating sa 1.9999. Okay, ang f of x niya ay 0.9999. So this is really close to the value of 1. Okay. So we have evaluated the limit of our function as x approaches 2 from the left, and that is equal to 1. Punta naman tayo sa second table. As x approaches 2 from the right, okay, so our f of x also approaches a certain value which is equal to also 1 din, yung in-approach niya. No? So this encircled value here is really close to also 1. So thus, the limit of our function x squared minus 3x plus 2 over x minus 2 as x approaches 2 from the right is also equal to 1. Okay? So from the left and from the right, they are both equal to 1. So they are equal, no? Okay, thus, ating final answer will be, ayan. So the limit of x squared minus 3x plus 2 over x minus 2 as x approaches 2, yan, wala nang negative or positive sign since na-evaluate na natin kanina from the left and from the right, which is equal to 1. Thus, the whole limit, okay, we found the limit of our function that is equal to the value of 1. So let us have the graph of this function. Okay. So if we substitute 2 to our function, we will get, okay, magkakaroon tayo ng denominator na 0. And kapag 0 ang denominator, it means our function is undefined for that given x value. Okay, so for x is equal to 2, undefined po yan. Right? So that means si 2 ay hindi kasama sa domain ni function. Now let's have the third example. We have this piecewise function and we will evaluate the limit of this function f of x as x approaches 1. Okay, so from the first and second table, it approaches the value of 1 from the left and from the right. Okay, so from the left, since these values are less than 1, from the right, since these values are greater than 1. Okay, so simply compute again. Compute ulit tayo. For the first table, we are going to use the first expression. Why? Because these values for x are less than 1. And for the second table, we are going to use the second expression because these values are greater than 1. Okay, so let's start. So x minus 3 muna. So what if x is equal to 0? The answer is negative 3. If 0.5, negative 2.5. Okay, negative 2.1. Okay, if x is lastly, if x is 0.9999, our f of x is negative 2.0001. Okay, so based on our table, okay, so as x approaches 1 from the left, so our f of x, okay, so it gets closer and closer to negative 2, di ba? So our limit of the function f of x as x approaches 1 from the left is equal to negative 2. Okay, how about the second table? So we are now going to use x squared plus 5. So x squared plus 5, calculate x2, we have 9. X is 1.8. F of x is 8.24. If x is 1.5, 7.25. If x is 1.1, 6.21. If x is 1.001, so that's 6.002 din na yan. So if 1.000001, our f of x is 6.000002. Okay, so that's it for our second table. Now, as we observe, our f of x also approaches a certain value, which is 6. No? So it gets closer and closer to 6 as x approaches 2 from the right. So the limit of the function f of x, okay? So ito po yon, yung buong piecewise function, yung ating f of x. So as x approaches 2 from the right naman, that is equal to 6. Okay, so ito na po yung sinasabi natin kanina. What if hindi equal yung limit on both sides of our equation? So they are not equal. Okay, so the limit of f of x as x approaches 1, okay, does not exist, or simply D and E. Alright, so ganito po yung final answer natin. Okay? So since the limit of f of x as x approaches 1 from the left and from the right is not equal to each other, so thus, ayan, limit of f of x does not exist. Okay, so wag na pwedeng ang answer na lang ay ganito po. Limit of f of x as x approaches 1, D and E. Yan. Understood na po na does not exist yan. So no need to write the equal sign since D and E is not a number. Okay, so let's have the graph of the piecewise function given. Okay, so let's see the coordinates of these ends of the line. Okay, so x, for this x is equal to 1 and 6. The coordinate of this is is 1, negative 2. Okay, so kung mapapansin natin, itong y values ay magkaiba, pero yung x value natin ay magkaparehas. Okay, so as we approach 1, as x approaches 1 from the left, the value gets closer and closer to negative 2. While from the right naman, if x approaches 1, the value of y gets closer and closer to 6. Okay? So kung mapapansin natin sa graph, di ba? putol siya. So, hindi siya continuous or magkadugtong. Thus, the limit of our function does not exist at x is equal to 1. Okay? So, next, this is the shortcut in finding the limit. So by observation, we can simply say that to find the limits of a polynomial or rational function, we just simply substitute c to the given function. So pwede pa lang i-substitute natin yung ina-approach ni x sa ating given na function lang. So let's try. So ito, yung isa-substitute natin since x approaches 4 daw. So find or evaluate the function at x is equal to 4. So f of 4 is equal to 2 plus 4 times 4. And we will get the answer of 18. Okay? Kung kanina, tinable natin and hinanap natin yung limit from the left and from the right side, okay, ang nakuha natin ay 18 din. Okay? So for this substitution method, the shortcut, in-evaluate lang natin yung function at x is equal to 4. And we also got an answer of 18. So let's have the second example. Evaluate f of 2. Okay, substitute lang yung ating 2 sa x's. So 2 squared minus 3x plus 2 all over 2 minus 2. So we will get answer of 0 over 0. So nung tinable natin, 0 over 0 ba yung sagot? So hindi. Nagkaroon tayo ng or nag-come up tayo sa answer na 1. So paano kaya natin maa-apply substitution method? Okay. To find the limit of our function. So 0 over 0, meaning we can further simplify. So hint na po yan that we can further simplify this function by factoring out the numerator. So let's see. Si x squared minus 3x plus 2, pwede siyang maging x minus 2 and x minus 1. So that's the factor of this quadratic expression. So x minus 2 of times x minus 1 over x minus 2. So we can cancel out x minus 2. Ang natira sa ating new function ay si x minus 1. So now, wala na tayong denominator. We can simply substitute 2 to our x minus 1. So f of 2 is equal to 2 minus 1. Thus, we get answer of 1. So f of 2 is equal to 1. So hindi na natin kinailangan na mag-table pa and find the limit from the left and from the right side. Now, if our limit or our given function is the piecewise function, tinable natin to and we get the limit of the function from the left and from the right and hindi equal yung naging sagot. Thus, the limit does not exist. Kapag sinubstitute natin basta yung 1 sa ating function, we will just get an answer of 6. So, that will be a wrong answer since ang sagot for this piecewise function is does not exist. Okay? So, kapag piecewise function, we have to evaluate the limit from both sides. Okay, so now let us consider this graph. So what if graph na yung given sa atin, we will find the limit of our functions. Okay, so let's see the graph. For this, we have some coordinates here. Yan, so mahalaga yung mga coordinates na mga circles na yan. So first item is we have to find the limit of f of x as x approaches negative 1.5. So nasan ba si x equals negative 1.5? So nandito po siya. Okay. So itong unshaded circle yung ini-intersect ng ating x is equal to negative 1.5. So what is the coordinate for that? So negative 1.5 and 2.5 for the y coordinate. Okay? So si y coordinate na yung ating limit. Okay? So kaya 2.5 po yung sagot dito. So limit of f of x as x approaches negative 1.5 is equal to 2.5. Okay? Let's see, but 2.5. As x approaches negative 1.5 from the left, so yung y natin, it also gets closer and closer to the value of 2.5. Also from the right, okay, so it also gets closer and closer to a single value which is also 2.5. Thus, kaya po, naging 2.5 yung ating answer. Next, evaluate the limit of the function as x approaches 0. So, nasan po si x equals 0? Okay, so ito po yan. Yan. So, na-intersect ng ating graph, dalawa. Itong shaded circle na to and unshaded circle na to. So, we have two coordinates for x is equal to 0. So, ano kayang coordinates nito? So, 0 and 1 and 0, 0. Okay? So, dalawa na yung dalawang y value yung meron tayo for x is equal to 0. Okay? So, thus, the limit does not exist. Okay? So, bakit kaya does not exist yung naging sagot natin dito? Okay? So, let's examine from the left of x is equal to 0. Ito yun. Okay? So, it approaches or yung y value natin, it approaches value of 1. Kaya nga, 0, 1 yung coordinate natin. And from the right, it approaches the value of 0. Kaya 0, 0 yung y coordinate or yung coordinates natin. Okay? So madali rin nating masasabi na does not exist using the graph kapag dalawa yung na-intersect sa ating function or dalawa yung coordinates, y coordinate or partner ni x is equal to 0. Alright, so let's move on to limit of f of x as x approaches 2. So bakit kaya equal siya sa 0? So nasan po ba yon? Si x is equal to 2 sa ating graph. So ito po yon. X is equal to 2. Ano kaya ang y coordinate niya? So 2, 0. Okay? So continuous siya. From the left, it approaches a certain value which is 0. So from the right, y also approaches 0. Okay, thus the limit of f of x as x approaches 2 is equal to 0. Lastly, so let us evaluate the limit of f of x as x approaches 4 naman. Okay, so nasan si x equals 4? Okay, dalawa ulit na coordinates yung nasa ating graph. Okay, 4, 0, and for -2. Okay? Dalawa yung kapartner ni 4, thus the limit does not exist. Okay po? So from the right, the y value, so the limit is 0. So from the right, so this is from the left, and from the right, our limit is -2. So they are not equal from both sides of our graph. Thus, the limit does not exist. So these are the theorems on limits. This will help us find the limits of our function. So for the first one, what if we have a function that is constant? So we will find the limit of k as x approaches c is still equal to k. So kapag given tayo constant lang and evaluate natin yung limit, okay, the answer will be also the constant itself. Okay, so another example, if limit of pi yung binigay ko sa inyo as x approaches 5, any number, so that is also equal to pi since pi is a constant. Okay, so next, the limit of x as x approaches c is equal to c. Kapag naman ine-evaluate natin yung limit ni x as x approaches c, okay, yung nandito sa baba, yun na rin yung kanyang limit. So, by substitution method, no? So, pag sinubstitute natin si c kay x, the answer will also be equal to c. So, these are the examples. Pansinin natin, ang limit ni x as x approaches 2 ay equal kay 2. The limit of x as x approaches 2/3 is equal to 2/3. So, basta dapat x lang yung ine-evaluate natin na function. Okay? So, for the next remaining theorems, we'll be assuming that limit of f of x is equal as x approaches c is equal to L, and on the other hand, another function g of x as x approaches c, so the limit is equal to m. So what does the constant multiple theorem says? So this says that the limit of a multiple of a function is simply that multiple of the limit of the function. Okay? So if a factor out lang natin si k, and then we will just be evaluating the limit of the function. So for example, we have limit of 5 multiply to the 3x. So ito yung ating g of x, no? As x approaches 1. So pwede kong ilabas si 5. So magiging 5 limit of 3x na lang. Nandira si 3x as x approaches 1. Okay? So evaluate natin tong limit of 3x as x approaches 1 by substitution method. So pag sinubstitute natin si 1, ang limit niya ay 3. So inilabas natin si 5, so that will be multiplied to 3. So our final answer will be equal to 15. So that is the constant multiple theorem. Again, nafa-factor out lang si constant. So next, the addition theorem. For this, we will have two separate functions. Okay, for example, we are evaluating the limit of 5x plus 3x as x approaches 1. Alright, so magkaibang function to. For example, ito si f of x. Ito naman si g of x. Okay? So, ang mangyayari parang madidistribute si limit. Okay? So, magiging limit of isa-isa siyang ma-evaluate. Limit of 5x as x approaches 1 plus, since addition yung ating operation dito, so plus the limit of 3x as x approaches 1. So by this, we can simply use yung ating previous theorem. So limit of 5x as x approaches 1 is equal to 5 plus the limit of 3x as x approaches 1 is 3. So our final answer will be equal to 8. Right? So that is what the addition theorem says. So kasama dito, for example, pinalitan ko yan ng minus. So ganun lang din po yan. So papalitan lang yung operation natin ng minus. So kasama siya sa addition theorem. Next, the multiplication theorem. Para lang din siyang addition theorem. Pero ipag-multiply natin since multiplication theorem nga, okay, na iba lang yung operation. We have the division theorem naman. So here we have the limit of f of x over g of x. Okay, so we will evaluate the limit of the numerator muna and then limit of the denominator. Okay? And then, tsaka natin i-divide yung dalawa nating nakuhang limit. So, yung nasa baba, again, the limit m must not be equal to 0 dahil kapag 0 yung nakuha natin sa denominator, okay, pero may value sa taas, the limit does not exist. For the power theorem, this is for exponent. So, ang sinasabi, the limit of f of x na naka-raise kay p as x approaches c. Okay? So, pwedeng evaluate muna natin yung limit and then tsaka natin i-raise kay p. So, for example, the limit of 3x squared, buong yan, naka-square as x approaches 1. Okay? So, pwedeng ang evaluate muna natin ay yung limit ni 3x lang. So, disregard muna si squared. So, limit of 3x as x approaches 1. So, tsaka natin siya buong i-square. So, the limit of 3x as x approaches 1 is equal to 3. And then, 3 squared is equal to 9. Okay? So, basically, ganun din yung ating radical or root theorem. So, pwede nating i-evaluate muna yung limit nung nasa loob ng ating radical and then tsaka pa natin kukunin yung root niya. Okay? So, the next two theorems are the substitution method. So, sabi dito sa theorem 2, the limit of f of x as x approaches c. So, we will just be evaluating the function at c. So, f of c. Okay? So, yung theorem 3, rational function lang siya. Para lang din siyang theorem 2. Pero merong numerator and denominator. Also, substitute lang natin yung value ni c. So, for this, theorem 2, yung ka-example. So, let's have the limit of 4x as x approaches 2, 4x squared. Yan. So, we have to evaluate f of 2 using this function. So, f of 2 is equal to 4 times 2 squared And that will give us 4 times 4 is 16. So that's basically the limit of 4x squared as x approaches 2 is equal to 16. Okay, for theorem 3, let's have the limit of x minus 1 over x plus 2 as x approaches 1. Okay, so we will just be substituting 1 sa ating x. So f of 1, that will be equal to 1 minus 1 over 1 plus 2. Okay, so that will give us 0 over 3. Okay, so pwede yan. 0 divide 3 is still 0. So thus, the limit of x minus 1 as x approaches 1 is equal to 0. So let's have this example. So let's evaluate limit of 5x minus 3 as x approaches 8. Okay, so using the theorem, let us apply. Okay, so ang nag-apply sa unang line natin ay addition theorem. So parang na-distribute si limit. Okay, pinaghiwalay. So the limit of 5x as x approaches 8 minus the limit of 3 as x approaches 8. Next rule is the constant rule. So inilabas si 5. So finactor out. So ang ma-evaluate lang is the limit of x as x approaches 8 and then minus 3. Bakit naging 3? Okay, again, the limit of a constant is also itself. Okay, so the limit of 3 is 3. Next, simplify pa natin. The limit of x as x approaches 8. Okay, x lang yung nandyan, so copy yung 8. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng 5 times 8 minus 3. So our final answer will be 37. Okay, so on the other hand, pwede natin gamitan yung Theorem 2, which is the substitution method. So, value of f at x is equal to 8. We get f of 8. Okay. So, ating function ay 5x minus 3. So, 5 times 8 minus 3. So, that will give us 40 minus 3. And final answer of also 37 using the substitution method. Okay, let's have number 2. The limit of x squared plus 5x plus 10 over x plus 1. Okay, so we can apply the theorems. Sa isa yan, na-evaluate natin yung limit. Okay, and then, tsaka natin i-solve. But, using Theorem 3, since meron siyang denominator, si Theorem 3 ang mag-a-apply. So, substitute yung 1 dun sa ating excess. So, we have 1 squared plus 5 times 1 plus 10 over 1 plus 1. That will give us 16 over 2. And our final answer will be 8. Alright. So, for our third example, last, limit of x squared plus 8x plus 15 over x plus 3 evaluated at x approaches negative 3. So, substitute lang natin si negative 3 sa ating x. So, f of negative 3, find. Okay, so negative 3 squared plus 8 times negative 3 plus 15. That is equal to or all over negative 3 plus 3. Okay. So, yung ating numerator ay mag-equate siya kay 0. And then, yung denominator, mag-equate din siya kay 0. So, 0 over 0, that is indeterminate. Meaning, hindi pa natin agad makukuha yung ating limit. So, again, pag 0/0, pwede, hint na siya na pwede pa nating isimplify yung ating function. Okay? So, further simplifying the function. So, ito na po yun. X plus 3 times x plus 5, yung factor ng ating numerator. Thus, we can cancel out si x plus 3 and matitira si x plus 5. And then, we could evaluate the value of x is equal to -3 using x plus 5. So, -3 plus 5. So, our final answer will be negative or positive 2. Okay, so that's it. That's how we find the limit of a function. Okay, we will just be evaluating the function at x is equal to c or yung kung saang ina-approach ni x. Okay, but ang concept talaga ng limit ay yung ginawa natin sa table kanina. Okay, as at x approaches a certain value, si y or si f of x natin also approaches a certain value, and that is called the limit. Okay, so these are the important or special limits to be remembered. Okay, so we will study about these sa ating mga susunod na weeks. Okay, so now it is your turn. Okay, you can try this for yourself.